of the most daunting things about buying and selling a property is the uncertainty, not knowing what's required of you and when, what you can expect and what your rights are. I'm going to be talking to Peter Bolton-King, Chief Executive of the NAEA, and he's going to help take away this anxiety by telling us about the whole process of buying and selling from search to completion.
Nikki, hello.
Hello,
Hi,
Peter.
good to see you. Come on in.
Thanks. So, Peter, this is your humble abode?
Nikki, I wish it was. I may be chief executive, but they don't pay me that much, I'm afraid. But lovely property, isn't it, though?
It is
Beautiful.
Beautiful. If I'm a buyer new to the market, how would you advise me to start?
You know, it must be very daunting for a first-time buyer especially, and others when people only move, say, once every 10 years to actually know what to do. Because, in fact, the way you approached it 10 years ago would actually be very different to the way you approached it now. And most people, about 80% of people now, say that their first little look at properties tends to be through the internet. And you've got an awful lot of places you can go to, in fact, a wealth of property portals, some of which will carry exactly the same property. Our one, for instance, the NEA property portal, which is called Property Live, which only comprises our own members, so you know that they're going to be covered by all our rules and everything else. That has a wide range of properties, but so do a lot of the others. That'll give you a feel. You can also go onto a number of websites which allow you to check what properties sold for recently up and down the road. Be careful though, because it's all historical data and it can lead you astray. You can also find out crime figures and loads of other things. But at the end of the day, nothing beats actually, to be fair, getting off your backside, visiting the area, especially if you don't know it.
Yeah,
and
I
actually,
suppose that's a very interesting point, isn't it? If you're new to the market and you don't know the area.
Yeah, very much so. You've got to go there, you've got to go around the agents, and don't be frightened of asking loads of questions. You'll soon get a feel for what appears to be a good road or an iffy road, and go different times of the day as well, because what it's like first thing in the morning, all the kids are going to school, it may be very, very different to what it's like in the afternoon, in the evening, and that sort of thing. But ask questions and don't be frightened. Go into one of our members' offices and say, I'm thinking of buying in wherever, what's it like? And
presumably be clear about what you're looking for.
That's very, very important. But on the other hand, you don't want to be so clinical that you actually think, I'm only going to buy a property in such and such a road at such and such a price with so many bedrooms, because it's interesting, but the number of times where people have said to me, I will only buy X, and actually they've ended up buying Z, which is nothing like what they originally looking for. So, you know, lifestyle, what you're looking, all comes into it these days.
Right, so it's that initial communication also with the agent to let them know what you're generally thinking about, and then they can guide you.
Absolutely, and again, you can pop into the local pub, quite honestly, it's another way of finding out what's going on locally.
Yeah. OK, turning it around, if you're a seller new to the market, how would you approach that? OK,
I think the important thing there, especially in the market we've got at the moment, which we all know is a little slower than it was 12 months, 18 months ago, and it'll come back again. But as we are at the moment, what you need to know is that you're choosing an agent who really is going to do the right job for you. So obviously you'd expect me to say use one of our own NAEA members, but I genuinely feel there are real advantages of doing that. You're dealing with professional people who work to a code of and that sort of thing as well. But when you get probably a number of agents up to see your property, make sure you ask questions. Don't just take what they say for granted. So if I was selling, I'd actually want to know, right, Mr. Agent, you're going to tell me how much you're going to charge, but I actually want to know how often are you going to be in contact with me? How proactive are you going to be at selling my property?
How are you going to market it?
How are you going to market it, indeed. And how often, for instance, are you going to phone me after there's been a viewing, so I know what's going on.
And what does the fee include, I suppose, as well?
Yes, certainly not only what the fee includes, but you've got to know exactly what's in the agreement as well. And there are a number of agreements. Again, one of the advantages of using our own members is they're more than likely to use one of our standard terms. But read the agreement very, very carefully, especially if there are any extras involved, especially if it's tying you in, for instance, to a length of time, what's called a sole agency agreement. Most agents would have in a contract which gives them 12 weeks, say, as an example, to sell the property. But what you wouldn't want to do, for instance, is tie you in with an agent who's going to say, right, you've got to stay with me 6 months.
Right, so that would be a mistake in the first place.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah. OK. No, that's very interesting. So, OK, the property is on the market.
Yep.
What's the next step for the buyer once they've seen a property that really takes their fancy?
Well, as far could I go back one stage, just a little bit before that, because a lot of people say to me, I've seen the property I like, how do I go about negotiating? And I have to say the same applies from the seller's side, this comment as well. Whatever you should do, is whether it be the buyer or the seller, don't get involved in talking to each other about, will you accept this, what about why? Because that's what you're paying your agent for.
Always go through the agent.
Absolutely, because the other thing is if you're the buyer, it's very much easier for you to say to the agent, you must be joking, than actually for you to look me in the eyes as the seller and say that. So use the agent as the go-between.
It takes out the embarrassment factor.
Absolutely, you're quite right. So that's what you must do. But before you even get to that stage as a buyer, I would be recommending that you must go and make sure that you've got the finance available. Again, especially in the current climate where credit is not as easy to get as it was. So you need to go and talk to a number of mortgage brokers or companies, find out what you can afford, and in effect, get your finance agreed in principle. They'll never say to you, oh yeah, you can definitely have it, because that'll depend on the property and everything else. But if you can go to an agent and to a seller as a buyer and say, I've got my mortgage agreed in principle, I've got no property to sell, you're in a much stronger position to actually start negotiating, because they'll listen to you.
And I suppose from a seller's point of view, if you are in that position, then you are a very attractive buyer.
At the moment, especially when there are more properties available and fewer buyers about who are in a position to go ahead, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's quite right.
Okay.
There's one other thing I think I should just warn people about as well, is the actual physical viewing of a property. You know, people think, oh, it must be easy. It's my house. I know it all. There's a lovely Arga in the corner. I know what people want. But actually, the owner of a property is not always, and very often is not, the best person to show people around. The advantage that the agent has is they know what you're looking for. Now, if I was the agent, now changing my other hat on, and you're the buyer, you would have already told me, or a good agent will already have found out, what you are really needing.
Yeah, what are my sort of big headline points?
Absolutely. So if I was then as the agent showing you round, I'd be saying, well, Nikki, look, you said to me you were desperate to have, you had to have a big bathroom or an office space or a room for the car or whatever.
Yes.
And matching these needs and these requirements against the benefits of the property, an agent can do, but the owner of the property can't do, because they will have never met these people. Exactly. So leave it to the agent again, if at all possible.
Right. Okay. So taking it then again back to the buyers and having put yourself in that position, having the finance in place, the property that you like, how then do you start the negotiation? How would you put the offer through to the seller?
Well, again, that's one of the things people say is, where do I start? Now, if you've got an asking price of, say, 200,000,